Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar on breeding for nutrition in organic seed systems. My name is Alice Formiga, and I'm the webinar coordinator for eOrganic. eOrganic is the organic agriculture community of practice with eExtension. We're a community of cooperative extension service personnel, researchers, ag professionals, organic certifiers, and practitioners. You can find all of our published articles, videos, and our many recorded webinars on organic farming topics on our website at extension.org/organic_production. This webinar is a rebroadcast of a presentation given at the Organic Seed Growers Conference in Port Townsend, Washington this past January. There are several live broadcasts that we recorded at the conference that can be found at extension.org/pages/61925, but I'll be typing that link into your chat box in just a moment so you know where to find those presentations. Before we begin, I'd like to pass this over to Michaela Colley, who will be moderating the presentation, and she's going to introduce the speakers.
Good morning, everyone. This is Michaela from the Organic Seed Alliance. We have three presenters this morning, the first of which is Philipp Simon. He's an USDA Agricultural Research Service geneticist and a professor of horticulture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. His research on carrot and garlic genetics and breeding is conducted to improve these crops for growers and consumers. Some of his key areas of interest include carrot and garlic genetics and the development of genomic tools and genetic improvement of carrot root knot nematode resistance, crop diversity and origins, and the nutritional quality and flavor of both carrots and garlic. Philip is also the PI on a new project called the Carrot Improvement for Organic Agriculture. Alice will give you the URL for that website at the end of this talk. Jim Myers will be the second speaker. Jim Myers holds the Bagot Fraser Endowed Chair of Vegetable Breeding and Genetics in the Department of Horticulture at Oregon State University. He works on a number of crops, including dry and snap beans, edible potted pea, broccoli, tomato, winter and summer squash, and sweet corn. His main interest has been to improve vegetable varieties for disease resistance and human nutrition while maintaining quality and productivity in improved varieties. Jim is also breeding tomatoes, broccoli, and summer squash for organic systems. His latest variety release is the high anthocyanin tomato Indigo Rose. The third presenter is Walter Goldstein. Walter Goldstein grew up and received his education in Washington State, but now lives in Wisconsin. He has bred corn under organic conditions since 1989. He was the research director at Michael Field's Agricultural Institute for 25 years. He has recently begun a research and education organization called the Mandamin Institute for breeding nutritionally valuable crops and promoting healthy farming practices. The speakers will be giving their presentations for about an hour, and then we'll have half an hour for questions and answers. If you pass it off to Dr. Phil Simon.
Thank you, Michaela. Welcome to this webinar. I'm joining you from Madison, Wisconsin. I appreciate the introductions from Alice and from Michaela. And with that, I'll proceed to present my seminar on breeding for nutrition, discussing some of the prospects and challenges for plant breeders. To give a little bit of background on this subject, please be reminded that there's a close connection between plants and people that grew with the domestication of plants about 10 or 12,000 years ago. Certainly domestication of plants and animals was one of the most significant human achievements and put us in a position today where we're completely dependent on domesticated plants and animals as sources of food. I like a paraphrase of a statement of Jacob Bronowski's, which says that humans first domesticated plants, but then, in a sense, crops domesticated humans in allowing us to develop into civilizations and societies that we have today. With this process of domestication, initial efforts were to develop staple foods to feed the first civilizations, and these include crops such as rice, wheat, corn, potatoes, which are major sources of calories for humans today, as they have been for many years. In addition to the domestication of these staple foods, the process of domestication also involves bringing in a collection of fruits, vegetables in, that provide us not only the major calories that we have in our diet today, but also a collection of compounds called phytonutrients. The major compounds that provide fat, protein, and calories in our diet. The domestication of fruits and vegetables also brought a collection of compounds that we refer to as phytonutrients to the diet. Phytonutrients include a broad range of compounds, and in some cases include those major so-called macronutrients, carbohydrates, oil, and protein, but in addition include minerals and vitamins as well as provitamins, and I'll talk a little bit about those as we go along here. In general, the definition of phytonutrients are those compounds that are in plants that have health-enhancing benefits, and some phytonutrients you might be familiar with include lycopene in tomatoes, sulforaphanes in broccoli, anthocyanins in strawberries, and many other fruits and vegetables, and thiosulfonates in onion and garlic, just to name a few. So given this collection of nutrients that plants provide in our diet, let's take a look at where we are in supplying nutrients to consumers today. In this process of domestication, we've achieved this supply of nutrients fairly well, but there's still some nutrients that, even given our broad diets available today, we're short in our intake. And I'll talk about primarily from the U.S. standpoint because that's where we have more information. And if we look at nutrient intake in the U.S., there are a few nutrients that actually we get from plants that fall in the category of being shortfall nutrients, meaning that their intake is at about half of what is recommended for the U.S. population. Some of these phytonutrients, you see listed on the screen, include two vitamins, vitamin A and C. This survey, by the way, goes back to a 2004 evaluation, and the inclusion of vitamin E and folate wasn't very complete. These probably also too should be included. In addition to these vitamins, there are several minerals, calcium, magnesium, and potassium, in addition to fiber, that are shortfall nutrients in the U.S. diet today. And this is interesting to see that we have these shortfall nutrients at the same time we have an obesity problem in the U.S., where it's estimated that roughly a third of the adults and a sixth of the children and adolescents are obese. Globally speaking, just to give a little bit of a global perspective, undernutrition or malnutrition is even more significant problem, particularly for iron and what's referred to here as VAD, which is vitamin A deficiency. And like the U.S., in addition to these undernutrients for certain compounds, there's an obesity problem for the rest of the world, as we're experiencing in the U.S. So given this interesting situation where we have an under consumption of certain nutrients, we see nutritional diseases quite common in the developing world. And these are often vitamin-specific deficiencies, but in addition include overall malnutrition or undernutrition, low intake of calories. This varies quite widely, as both in terms of geographic regions and also from year to year. And I'll turn most of my attention for the rest of the talk to nutrients in the U.S. diet, because that's where we have the major database. But some of these problems also certainly are prevalent in the developing world. So looking at food sources in the U.S. diet, especially looking at those where we have an undernutrition or low intake of nutrients, this next slide has a somewhat complicated table where along the left side we see the major macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fat, where you see over 50% of the carbohydrates come from plant sources in the diet. These would mainly be from cereals, as you can see across the top. More than 40% of our carbohydrates coming from cereal crops. Likewise, for protein and fat, we have significant intake coming from plant sources in the diet. This is broad spread over vegetables and potatoes, fruits, and cereals. Going further down the list, we see some of these nutrients that are examples of shortfall nutrients where we have an inadequate intake. Vitamin A, vitamin C, some of the B vitamins, folate, and on the bottom of this fiber. So you see that that plants in our diet, crop plants, are major sources of these shortfall nutrients, vitamins A, C, folate, and fiber. And notice on this chart that vegetables and fruits are major sources of many of these shortfall nutrients, as you see listed in the table. Vegetables and potatoes in particular are major sources of these nutrients in our diet. So given this background, the fact that we do have some malnutrition or shortfall nutrients in the U.S. diet, and already we get some of these nutrients from these shortfall nutrients from fruits and vegetables, where are we at in the process of understanding which particular foods contribute to the U.S. nutrient intake for these particular nutrients in our diet? So to look at this question, I was involved in a group looking at the whole issue of breeding plants for human nutrition. And with this team effort, we looked at this very question of where we get specific nutrients in our diet. Starting with a look at where we get vitamin A in our diet, notice that this is a shortfall nutrient, that you got 2 asterisks, so more than 30% of the vitamin A in the U.S. diet comes from vegetables and potatoes. What are those vegetables and potatoes in the U.S. diet that contribute to vitamin A intake? Well, in the case of vitamin A, all of our vitamin A we get from plants ultimately comes not directly as vitamin A, but rather as these orange pigments that you see in this cucurbit and papaya in this slide. These orange pigments are precursors to vitamin A, and in fact, these orange pigments are very rich sources of vitamin A. So looking at this quite complicated slide, I think it's interesting to present because it shows our specific sources of vitamin A in the U.S. diet. And this list, it comes from the survey that's mentioned on the top, and the website is given elsewhere in the presentation, where the single largest source of provitamin A orange carotene pigments, beta carotene in this case, comes from carrots, raw carrots in particular. So roughly 18% of the carotenes in the diet, as you can see at the top of the slide, comes from carrots. As we go down the slide, you see additional nutrients, additional food sources of this nutrient listed. And so overall, then we can get some idea then where this vitamin A precursor, beta carotene, comes from. Again, this is interesting from the standpoint of the question, knowing where these nutrients come from, what can we do as in a plant breeding setting to look at improving nutrient intake. So that was with vitamin A. Vitamin C is another one of these nutrients that falls on this shortfall list. Where do we get vitamin C in the diet? Not surprising, vitamin C, its major source in the U.S. diet comes from orange juice. You can see roughly 18% from canned unsweetened orange juice. And the way the survey is taken, you see different forms of orange juice listed, unsweetened and undiluted, for instance. But fruits in particular are very rich sources of vitamin C, but also note that there are some vegetable sources of vitamin C on this list, things like broccoli and tomatoes. So these are 2 of the shortfall nutrients, vitamin A and vitamin C, and these are some sources in the U.S. diet where we get those nutrients from. So we could go through this for all the nutrients, but I think the point to look at at this point in the presentation is which targets should we look at, which nutrients should we look at targeting for genetic improvement. We know there are nutrients in the U.S. diet, and for that matter in the developing world, for which there are shortfalls. Which nutrients should we target, and how can we improve the delivery of those nutrients to consumers in a plant breeding setting? Well, with this kind of thinking, we need to look at questions like, should we look at nutrients that are already rich in vegetable sources, let's say? Look at improving vitamin C in fruit sources from oranges as a breeding goal, or should we look at less well-characterized phytonutrients? Those would include things like the anthocyanins, sulforaphanes, and thiosulfonate compounds I mentioned earlier that occur in crop plants, in particular fruits and vegetables. the analysis of many of these nutrients can be expensive and often can be complicated. So if you're going to have a goal of improving nutrient delivery to consumers, this is certainly something you need to think about. With some of the nutrients, we also need to be aware of the fact that there tends to be some change in opinion as to whether these compounds have as potent a nutritional value as they may or may not, in particular with some of these newer discovered phytonutrients. And then finally, I'm looking at this perspective from a plant breeding view. Is plant breeding really the best way to improve nutrient quantities in fruits and vegetables? Because in some cases you can improve certain nutrients, say in garlic, by altering the production practices of the crop. And also there are fortified foods where it may be easier to fortify in a processing way rather than breeding for nutrients. So looking at these things collectively, let's take a closer look at the question of breeding crops for improving the delivery of these provitamin A carotene compounds. I use this as an example partly because I work on carrots, and this is a major source of these compounds. And so the question is, how should we look at improving provitamin A carotenes in carrots, and how do we want to do that? A little bit of background: these orange pigments that are in carrot roots actually occur in green leaves, and they're essential for photosynthesis. I mentioned before that vitamin A itself is not present in plants, but rather these vitamin A precursors that are derived from these compounds when we eat them. And that in addition to the fact that we have shortfall nutrients for vitamin A in the U.S. diet, vitamin A is a major deficiency worldwide, even though there's not much overt deficiency in the U.S. So what can we then do in the setting of agriculture to provide more vitamin A from the carotenes of fruits and vegetables for U.S. consumers? Well, one way, simple way, would be to increase the productivity of crops that provide these nutrients if, in fact, crop production is a limitation. In fact, for most crops in the U.S., we don't really have too much limitation on how much crop we can produce, but in the developing world, the ability to actually produce these crops can be a limitation. Another thing that can be done is to look at a range of crop varieties that are already available and ask the question, which are the better varieties that provide vitamin A amongst that collection you're looking at. This would forego the need to actually do some new plant breeding effort, because it may be that what you need is already on the shelf. It's just a matter of using it. And finally, you might take an effort to increase genetically increase the provitamin A carotene content of a crop like carrots in a breeding program. But in addition to actually increasing the vitamin content, another way to increase intake of vitamins is to encourage consumers to increase more of a commodity. And so there are indirect ways to increase nutrition intake by enhancing consumption with efforts like improving flavor and improving convenience of fruits and vegetables. So given that range of possibilities, let's say that the approach taken is one of breeding for higher content of nutrient in a vegetable. One question we asked in this review was, is there genetic variation in the crop germplasm in the range of crops that's out there today? Is there genetic variation that we can tap into in a plant breeding program to improve nutritional content? So we reviewed some of the literature and found out that the short story is that for all cases, in almost all cases, there's quite a broad range of genetic variation in the crop plants that we're using in breeding programs that would allow for breeding for improved content of these nutrients for virtually all crops, for virtually all nutrients. Case in point here being for carotenes in carrots. Current carrots today in the U.S. contain about 80 parts per million. Beta-carotene, there's beta-carotene content up to 300 parts per million in the broad range of carrots that's out there. So this would be an example where we could certainly breed for higher carotene content in carrots. Similarly, going down the table, we see commodities like spinach. We could breed for almost double the carotene contents in spinach. we could breed for much higher carotene content in broccoli and so on down the list. And so in this survey, we looked at not only carotenes, but we also looked at vitamin C. There's also there's some genetic variation noted for vitamin C content in oranges that indicate a possibility for breeding for higher vitamin C in this particular commodity. So given this, then we, just to reiterate very briefly, there are some nutrients that are shortfall nutrients in the diet. There's variation for nutrient content that we could breed for in most of these nutrients in the plant breeding program, in addition to other breeding activities we might want to undertake. I didn't include minerals in my other part of the presentation, but minerals too vary widely in a wide range of genetic variation of crops that we have. So there's lots of opportunities for breeding for improved nutrition in crops. And this is not only, I mentioned fruits and vegetables predominantly, but in agronomic crops there already has been some effort to improve nutritional value in breeding programs for specific phytonutrients. Some cases in point being the Quality Protein maize project, which is breeding for higher lysine, amino acid lysines in maize for some time. The Harvest Plus program looks at increasing carotene content, provitamin A carotene content in corn, but also in cassava and sweet potato, iron in beans and millet, zinc in rice, and wheat. And there's quite a bit of effort in agronomic crops looking at improving cooking oil quality, in other crops looking at fiber quality, and finally at starch quality. So beyond these agronomic crops, there are many opportunities also in horticultural crops, fruits and vegetables, for capturing that genetic variation that exists in these crops and improving the nutrient and phytonutrient content. There's some examples already in place where there is wide range of phytonutrient variation that you can estimate visually by looking at something like sweet potatoes, where the darker orange color of this range of sweet potato germplasm shows that it reflects the difference in carotene content. In addition to that, these white sweet potatoes would have none of these provitamin A carotenes. Looking at this next slide, it might not be immediately obvious what we're looking at, but these are slices of bananas. There are very dark orange bananas that have high provitamin A beta-carotene in them that could be used immediately as a richer source of vitamin A, and this is being proposed in parts of the developing world. Similarly, in tomatoes, there's range of variation in color that reflects carotene content. And even in crops like cucumber, which is what this is, there is genetic variation within cucumber where we could tap into this to develop high beta-carotene cucumbers, which is an effort that John Navazio and I have been involved in. So if we look at this range of genetic variation for compounds, look at the range of variation within crops, there are many examples for carotenoids, vitamin C, other vitamins, protein, and calcium, that where horticultural crop breeders have taken some effort to look at capturing this variation and developing more nutritious crops today. So looking at a specific example in more detail, crop that I work with, predominantly carrot, where can we go with increasing the provitamin A carotenoid content of orange carrots? There's a wide range in carrots, as I mentioned before, that is in carotene content that's reflected in color, as you see in this picture. And in breeding for carotene content, we've doubled carotene content from the progenitor carrot shown in the middle of this slide to the darker orange carrot on the left, and tripled it to the carrot on the right in a simple, straightforward, classical plant breeding type of a program. So lots of opportunities for this in carrots, and this is in fact translated to a more nutritious carrot crop today, roughly double of the 1950s in carotene content, simply by the whole process of plant breeding. So that today a carrot contains roughly half of one carrot provides enough vitamin A for half of the vitamin A needs of an adult today. Now, if we improve nutritional quality, though, we also want to be sure we improve flavor and convenience, because at the end of the day, consumers will look for variables like flavor as being more important than nutritional quality. So again, very briefly, we have improved carrot consumption by several of these breeding techniques: convenience, breeding for convenience, baby carrots, breeding for better flavor, and breeding for higher carotene content, so that the actual per capita consumption of carrots today is higher. And with a higher carotene content, we've increased the vitamin A intake as well. So that if we look at carrots in terms of a nutritional benefit, we can get 1 square meter of carrots, about 2,500 carrots, which can be easily grown in a year, provides enough vitamin A for 10 adults. And this is an example of one of the few crops where we've improved nutritional quality over time. So genetic improvement of nutrients can be undertaken with simple tools in some cases. In other cases, requires complex lab analysis. One thing that should be noted is that breeding for nutritional quality typically imparts no economic value to the growers of the crops, and so from a marketing standpoint, this makes it difficult to market on nutritional value alone. And furthermore, this is because the nutritional content can not easily be labeled. So improving things like flavor is important if we're looking at ways to increase the intake of vegetables for consumers. So this really is a team approach to improve nutrient intake that may start with breeders, but certainly involves growers, marketers, nutritionists, and others to keep us moving along. In fact, we've made lots of progress in improving the farm values of nearly all crops in plant breeding programs, but we haven't made a lot of progress in improving nutritional value. I won't present the information for time reasons today, but there are good indications that there are not only health benefits to be had from improving nutritional value from fruits and vegetables, but there are also economic benefits. And again, for purposes of time, I see I'm running a little bit late, so I will quickly go through this. But as we look at this whole question of improving nutritional value in plant breeding programs, we need to go back to the question of what crops are we going to focus on, what nutrients, and what tools are we going to use to improve nutritional value. This can involve improvements at many levels, both ranging from the field to the home kitchen, and the issue of value to the grower, and it might relate to labeling of nutrients, is important, because if the grower can't reap any benefits, they likely will not be included in an improvement program. But in any case, improvement of nutrients in a plant breeding program is a team approach, so that whereas we've made lots of progress in domesticating plants and animals, and in fact humans today are dependent on these domesticated crops and farm animals, we really have a responsibility, given the fact that we have genetic variation and tools to improve nutritional quality as we're moving forward in agriculture today. This will not be a simple task. It requires some teamwork and likely international cooperation as well. But in the end, like these individuals of 150 years ago, where production of crops is a team effort, similarly improvement of crops is a team effort. And just want to briefly mention some sources of funding for my program, which I'm very grateful for. And with that, finish this seminar. Thank you very much.